Hey everyone, Arthur Fantastic here, and today we are going to be discussing this video that me and my wife, found on Twitter. As always, you can find me on Instagram at Arthur Fantastic, 1K instead of IC, holler. And we also have a subscribe star that is available below in the description. And finally, I'll be I have a whole bunch of stuff that I will be posting on this channel, both here on YouTube and BitChute, so be on the lookout for that. Um, so the problem here is Michael Knowles. Pearl, who's on screen right now, this is Pearl, just Pearly Things, and Michael Knowles. If I just had him there for a second, and if I can get him on screen, boom, there's Michael Knowles. Um, both are large creators in the red pill sphere, if you will, of the YouTube and just the internet in general, the manosphere, in some ways. While Michael Knowles is somewhat of what many may call the mainline Orthodox Catholic position and the mainstream conservative. Pearly is more into the manosphere relationships, the red pill in terms of what's going on with men in the dating sphere and the sexual dating market as well. So that's a little primer for who these people are. My problem that I've discussed on this channel, and more specifically on my BitChute where there's less censorship, is Cuckeditianity. See, the problem with Michael Knowles is he's a um let's put that weak, limp-wristed Cuckeditianity neocon. In many ways, he is the remnants of a dying sect of conservatism, one that is still alive today on the backs of sellouts and mostly old dying goblins. Unfortunately, um, Michael Knowles has fallen trap to a lot of these entrapments of this neocon, unwilling to budge on anything that has already been told to them on, specifically in terms of their faith, Catholicism. As a former Catholic all my life, from a devout Catholic Filipino Puerto Rican family, it is beyond a doubt that in his mind, Michael Knowles is doing his best job as a Catholic. But what we're about to hear is pretty fucking ridiculous. And it's just the problem of being out of tune with reality, which is the same problem of liberals. One last note before we go into this actual video is this: Michael Knowles has great content. I agree with him on many subjects. I agree with him on the topic of abortion and how far he goes on these topics of abortion and transgenderism. He's fucking right. But in this video, he's wrong. And I'm going to take the time, despite literally feeling like shit, to watch this video and point out it's wrong. Because pointing out shit that's wrong, especially when it's connected to the body of Christ, that is the body of believers, who are called to go out, be fruitful and multiply, not be alone for fucking ever, literally made, oh, it is not good for a man to be alone, so I'll make a woman. So the man is not good to be alone, and the woman is literally made to be a companion. When it comes to the Bible and the body of believers, we have to fucking put our foot down and even call out our so-called heroes and let them know what they're fucking wrong about. I wouldn't call Michael Knowles my hero, but I would say he's one of those people that are in the loop of the news feed, if you will, of my social media. If you combine them all together, it's one of the voices that I will listen to. He's made great points. But let's get into the video. Let's get into the video.
What's the argument for what marriage is, why it's still good to do, no matter what the policies are, why man is inclined toward it. No, any policy.
So already we're talking about a ridiculous. He's making ridiculous. It doesn't matter any policy. All right, there are already policies in place that are unbiblical. See, one of the places where feminism is most alive is the fucking church. Okay? The modern church thrives on feminism. Most people going to church are women. The minority of people going to church are men. Oh, well, I go to an Orthodox church and it's mostly men. Okay, so you're bragging about a sausage show? Okay, that's great. But that doesn't change the overall statistics, or for my English friends, the metrics of what's going on in the church, the demographics. And it's mostly women. Another note, why I know better than him is while he's been married for a long time, I've been married for 5 years. Thank Yah. Hallelujah. Thank you to my wife. I kiss her hand. She's over here smiling. She's so good at being quiet. She's here every time, guys. I'm making a video. She's just so quiet and she's listening and she's my counsel. I love her 100%, but I'm also a polygamist, okay? Which was on the suggestion of my wife, okay? After reading the Bible together and going through many, many months of discussion on this. And so I'm still out there in the market dealing with what Pearl is talking about and what young men are dealing with. And I can tell from what Michael Knowles is dealing with, he is completely out of tune. And what he is observing, he's like a wasp, even though he's not a Protestant. Okay, let's listen. Continue to listen. I'll even start. It's only 9 seconds.
What's the argument for what marriage is, why it's still good to do, no matter what the policies are, why man is inclined toward it. No, any policy.
So it doesn't matter what policies are in place. You should do it because marriage is good. Well, yeah, I think marriage is good. But does that mean that you are required to get married by the government? Oh, well, he would say yes. He is totally 100% down on that. Okay? And despite there being all of these laws on the books, as well as just overall social norms that in place, models like the Duluth model, fucking all the quote unquote chivalry that we call today, which is actually repackaged feminism sold to men to make it seem as though there are romantics, that is from Rome, romance. They're romantics and they have this set idea of, oh, you give them flowers and diamond rings and you fucking take care of them and they've got to be housewives and they don't do anything outside the house. Have you ever read Proverbs 31? The Proverbs 31 woman is fucking trying to expand the household, trying to do work, weave baskets, weave linen, make money. Her eye is keen, she's loyal, she speaks instruction. She's just not some doubting 1950s housewife that does nothing except keep the home and drink wine when the kids are at school. You know what I mean? And what we have today in terms of the dynamic between men and women, I'm not going to say genders because I don't fucking even like that word gender, between the sexes, what we have today is completely lopsided. There's no recourse for a male against an insane woman, as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson puts it, and there isn't much to really enforce the traditional values other than hoping that women make the right decision. And even then, okay, women can make the wrong decision, and what is your recourse as a man? There is, you have completely become a slave and a cuck to society and what it has created, and it is not just appealing to the overall idea of marriage if you can't first understand that everything that undergirds what a good marriage is, what it should be, is completely t- inversed by modern society. And I fucking think that Michael Knowles knows this, but he's so knee deep in his own bullshit, in his own marriage, and which is a fucking. I'm glad that he has a great marriage. Y'all keep him and his family and continue to provide for him and his family. But that doesn't mean that that is in any way indicative or representative of what most people are dealing with today. Okay, I would say that is a rare situation. And I know that he knows that we all know that there's problems in every fucking marriage. But what we're about to get to is the insane levels where they have to take it to. Not only in, I guess, some mainstream Catholic positions, because as much as Catholics like to um, propagate the idea that it's one monolithic movement, there are many sects within Catholicism, as well as other. There's like other. I mean, it's only like point. Is it 10% or 0.9%? That's a big difference, but it's only a very small minority of Catholics that are from these other parts of. Uh, I forget they allow their priests to marry. They have some different doctrines, but they are part of the Catholic Church. They're not in communion with the Catholic Church. They're literally Catholics, and but most Catholics don't even know about that. Um, and maybe that would be the place for a lot of Catholics that are seeing the problems in the modern Catholic Church. But I don't, as a former Catholic, I don't consider myself Catholic at all. I don't consider myself a Protestant. I'm not protesting the current regime of Catholics and claim that I'm the true Catholic Church. No, I am a believer in Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and a part of the sect which some call the Way, and I call myself a Nazarene, as in the Nazarene or Watchman, or you might even say that's the same words. Nazar might mean offshoot, which has to do with, oh my gosh, has to do with prophetic um, passages in the Old Testament referring to the stump or shoot of Jesse becoming, that's where the Messiah comes from. But I digress. Let's let them keep going.
Yeah, I think marriage is always good. Any policy. Yeah, I think any country in the world at any time in history, it's basically good to get married. So a guy, so if they make a policy that,
Okay, she's a little bit stumped, and I understand, but let me speak for Pearl for a second. Um, that is fucking ridiculous. Because of how we see the setup of what is going on now. And he said anytime in history. Why is it that there was a lower divorce rate, more intact families, not only in the white, but the black and Latino and Asian communities? The numbers have literally inverted from there being a 80% to 70% intact families with a father to 70% of plus of black mothers being single mothers. Um, and sure, there could be more and there could be less, if we put in, different factors of, oh, well, they don't go by the government marriage, but, that's irrelevant. In reality, that's a pretty accurate number. And that it's so high is only an attestation to how fucking bad things are right now. And to just generally, with a broad brush, say that, oh, it's pretty much good to get married. You know what I mean? It's good to get married if you're appealing to the idea of what is in the Bible. But that's not what people are doing. And even in the modern era of people, there are less believers. And among the believers, quote unquote, you can't see me doing the air quotes, there are only a few that are active church going believers, which is another misnomer for me, because I don't think that a church is a building that you go to. When believers in the first century, second century, third century were going to synagogues, and there was no such thing as a church. Their church was the body of believers, okay, and they were in different. They were they congregated in communities, but on the Sabbath congregated in synagogues. The Sabbath being Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, not Sunday. Um, but that all being said, like, among the believers today, only few are active believers, and among active believers is there a, a significant drop in divorce among that subset of Americans. Okay, which is to say, people who actually believe in the values and traditions of the Bible are more likely to stay in married and have an intact family. That is, of course, an oversimplification, because different quote unquote churches have their own doctrines. But overall, if they put their faith in and are faithful to Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach, the Messiah, God in the flesh, then they have a pretty good chance if they stay faithful. Right? That makes sense.
I think something crazy.
She wants to think
I
of
mean,
something
even
crazy.
the policies that are today, it's like, you know, that if, so really any policy. Wait, what? What?
Say that you have a son, so your son got married and his wife got pregnant, and come to find out 5 years later, he's not the biological father. He's been living this lie for the last 5 years. Would you advise your son to stay married to her?
For because I have a microphone on, was if my son were married and his wife cheated on him and had a kid by another man, would I support my son divorcing? I do not support divorce under any circumstances. So yeah, I think what yeah I. He doesn't say that, but so the question that was brought up from off camera was, what about the so-called acceptive clause in the Gospel of St. Matthew, where our Lord says, what God has joined, let no man separate, except for the case of porneia. Mm-hmm. And what's curious about this so-called acceptive clause, which in recent centuries, some Protestants have interpreted to mean that if your wife cheats on you, you can divorce her, but which had not been understood that way for the vast majority of the history of the church, and certainly.
Okay, vast majority of the history of the church. Are you also including the church that began in the assembly in the wilderness, the church in the wilderness in Sinai? The ones that came out in Exodus? Or because if we include all those, then you'd be fucking wrong, and you'd be cutting out half of church history, right? But I guess we can just call the church, because we have covenant theology in Catholicism, which is basically dispensationalism light, where you have these theological covenants. Notice the predicate, is that the right, the uh the former title theological of the theological covenant, because it is nowhere enumerated in the Bible that these covenants exist. Rather, they're theological ideas that they have eisegetically put into the text and then come up with their own new, not biblical theology in regards to covenant theology, which is basically just another idea of supersession or replacement theology. And it's no, in fact, those verses, which we will take a look at in a moment, reflect the ongoing debate among the people of the Second Temple period, that being the school of Shammai and the Pharisees, who are arguing. We're going to look at that verse and text and see if what he is asserting is true, and then we are going to conclude with why Michael Knowles is being a total cuck bitch. Let's continue.
This still is the case in the Catholic Church and elsewhere. Um, I guess one way to understand that and that apparent contradiction with the other synoptic gospels, which do not have the so-called acceptive clause, is to remember that St. Matthew is writing for a Jewish audience.
So what he's saying isn't necessarily true. He's just pandering to the Jewish audience. I mean, it's remember, he's writing to the Jews. He's just trying to confuse the Jews. He's not actually speaking any truth. He's not an eyewitness.
And there was a live debate at the time over the exception, what type of adulterous exception that would imply.
Oh, wait. It says adulteress. Is it about adultery? That's another thing we're going to take a look at. We're going to go look at the original Deuteronomy statute too. But now he's saying that despite that church history was not that way, we're discussing a debate at that time. Okay.
And so one way of understanding Matthew chapter 19 and the acceptive clause is to say, actually what he's saying is, let's ignore this whole sort of debate that's taking place between various Jewish groups and just get to the heart of the matter. Furthermore,
what? That makes no sense. So he says, he adds a quote of Jesus, except for sexual immorality, which is actually a reference to uncleanness, but rendered as sexual immorality more generally. Or is that? I guess that's not even. I guess that's less generally. That's more specific. But there was implications of it being about sexual uncleanness. Regardless, Matthew recording a new quote from Jesus is not to dismiss what Jesus is saying. He literally just gave him an exemptive clause. What he literally acknowledges is called that. He's saying that it could be just something to cause people to just move on and get to the heart of the matter. What? And I want to go back 10 seconds. Let's go back 10 seconds and just hear. The fact that you see in the other Gospels saying is, let's ignore this whole sort of debate that's taking place between various Jewish groups and just get to the heart of the matter. Okay, so he did say what I thought he said. So he made a comment on the debate, gave a specific answer, and somehow that is a way to avoid the debate between people? Or the fact that you see in the other Gospels, not repeated with the acceptive clause, would seem to bolster the traditional view of the Church, understood in the magisterium and the depositive faith. So, because there's only one verse that says it, which we will see reflects the Deuteronomy commandment, and so that there is some type of interpretive error in what he is saying and what unfortunately many Christians say. This is the problem. People like Michael Knowles Augustine, yes, the Augustine, they are students of rhetoric. And they're really good at passing off an argument to make it make sense. And in that moment, it makes sense. Sure, I listen to Michael Knowles. It kind of makes sense, but let me fucking pause you what you're saying and think about it, because you're selling it so good, because you really make it sound like as a matter of fact. But as a matter of fact, you've also said it's one way to interpret it, and it's a really shit way to interpret it. Okay? And the appealing to the traditional stance of the church, quote unquote, okay, which within itself, even today, has a diverse opinion and throughout time had a number of, obviously, not only debates but literal schisms over this topic. One might think that this is completely Catholic superiority complex type shit, where they insist and appeal to consistently and uninterrupted the authority of the so-called Roman Catholic Church, the so-called authority of the Roman Catholic Church, and its um exclusive rights on like what the interpretation of the Bible is. And it can be so because they have such a wide influence. But that does not actually mean in any in terms of spiritual significance the intended purpose of the Bible, when they are literally ignoring parts of the Bible. Oh, we're just going to ignore Matthew. Well, maybe Mark or Luke or John and whoever else is fucking also covering this discussion just already know the law, because they all did, because that's what Jesus is constantly talking about. We'll discuss that momentarily. Let's let them finish.
And articulated by the victim of Christ on earth that no, you don't get to divorce just because you cheat on your wife. Also, because it just at a natural level.
Because you cheat on your wife, or your wife cheats on you. Okay, there's another problem. What is adultery? Adultery is defined as a woman breaking wedlock. That's the literal Hebrew word. And in all the statutes and laws that talk about adultery, it discusses a married woman. A married woman breaking wedlock. Okay? That's because a man breaking wedlock, that is, a man being with another woman, is allowed via polygamy, as in God identifies as a polygamist in Ezekiel 23, Jeremiah 3, and Jeremiah 31. Yeah, so I'm thinking Jeremiah 3 verses 8 to 10, Jeremiah 31 verse 31 to 33, where he discusses being a husband to both of them, and discussing his two wives, and discussing how there was two sisters and he took both of them, which also throws an interesting idea on some other verses in the Bible that we won't get into today. Nonetheless, we have to discuss what Michael Knowles is discussing, and what he's discussing is basically the mainstream Catholic position, where no divorce, not at all. Even though Jesus just gave the exception, obviously, not at all.
Create a perverse incentive such that if two people don't like each other, there's an incentive to just go out and cheat and dissolve the marriage. Okay, so if he's raising a kid that's not his, you would support them staying together. I oppose divorce in all circumstances. Yeah. Wow. That's a conservative view, not a liberal view. Yeah, I guess.
No, that isn't.
Maybe I'm liberal in that one. Yep. So. No, I think you're liberal in a lot of ways, and I think the red pill is liberal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that is not a liberal view. Ironically, Christ Almighty.
The feminist. Well, I disagree with that.
Thank you for disagreeing, Pearl. Thank you for disagreeing. Let's